Excelente análisis, como siempre, Álvaro Alba. Y quisiera entonces pasar a una sesión de preguntas sobre esto, por favor.
Soy Randy Espinet. Felicito a los tres panelistas y al moderador. My congratulations to the panelists, to the brave panelists, to the moderator. En Cuba, si puedo dirigirme a español ahora, no empezó con terror, empezó tomándonos el pelo, empezó con mentiras. Y después vino el terror. En Venezuela, ya saben, de las mentiras, y están tratando de implementar el terror. Esa es la diferencia en el tamaño de las manifestaciones. Pero hay grandes héroes ahí. Mi amigo Antuna, que nos reunimos con 4 veces, creo que tú estabas también. La paliza, la pedrada, todo lo queremos a él y a tantos otros a morir, Iliana, todo. Pero bueno, mi pregunta en realidad para el señor Kennedy Bolívar. Supongo que tus padres tuvieron diseños para ti, ¿no? Porque un nombre así. Pero mi pregunta es muy sencilla. Depende mucho de lo que pasa allá, de cómo cambie el pensar, cómo se vaya moderando el pensar de la gente en Petare, en el 23 de enero, en Catania. Dime, por favor, cuál es tu más objetivo pensamiento al respecto. Lo están perdiendo, ya lo han perdido, van camino. El régimen está perdiendo esos barrios muy pobres, por favor.
Yo no sé si le van haciendo la traducción a Dimitro. Ok, perfecto.
Usas aquí, si no te oye.
Sí,
¿Atrás lo ven?
sí, o me paro, no sé, como quiera. Ok. Con respecto a esa pregunta, lo bueno del tema de las crisis en nuestros países y sobre todo en Venezuela es que las crisis no distinguen. Y cuando digo que las crisis no distinguen es porque la crisis nos está afectando a todos. Y sobre todo que nos afecta más a aquellos sectores populares en los cuales las condiciones hoy por hoy son mucho más deprimentes, mucho más denigrantes de lo que eran hace 10 años atrás. Es decir, hemos ganado y hemos conquistado muchos espacios. Lo que sucede en Venezuela es un tema muy particular. En Venezuela reprime el sector militar, el sector policial y el sector paramilitar. Y donde funcionan y están cohesionados, a pesar de que son pocos, pero son personas armadas, es en las zonas populares. Porque recordemos que en el año 89 ya dejó un precedente en Venezuela con una crisis económica que fue catastrófica y que dejó además para nosotros un mal recuerdo en la historia del país. Y que además es lo que el gobierno le teme. Y por eso es que el gobierno allí trata de encajar un discurso que sea a favor de ellos, que la crisis que está generada es producto de los ricos, es generada por los empresarios, es generada por el sector de oposición, pero que también es ese sector que no quiere, entre comillas, a estos sectores populares. Pero hoy por hoy, amigos, hemos ganado un terreno fundamental.
Pero lo han perdido
si lo ha perdido el gobierno, nosotros.
Si lo ha perdido el gobierno.
El gobierno lo ha perdido.
Todo eso que mencioné.
Sí, todo eso que mencioné. Por cierto, la alcaldía de Sucre, por ejemplo, la alcaldía de Sucre la ha ganado el gobierno una sola vez. La ha ganado la oposición y hoy está en manos de oposición. El caso, por ejemplo, del 23 de enero es difícil, pero recordemos que es una zona, diría yo, liberada. Esa sí es una zona liberada. Pero hay un precedente. Yo soy de Barinas, de donde es Chávez, de donde se dice que nació la revolución y es la cuna de la revolución. Yo me gradué en el Liceo Daniel Florencio Oleari, que es donde se graduó también Chávez. Yo fui presidente de ese centro de estudiantes allí. Y Barinas, Chávez, el chavismo la perdió. Entonces hemos ganado y hemos conquistado muchos espacios a nivel democrático. Pero la lucha no es democrática realmente, porque no estamos ante un gobierno democrático. La lucha es en las calles y la lucha es no violenta, que es lo que al gobierno le ha enfermado. y no le queda otra arma que tratar de reprimir para tratar de replegarnos a los hogares y quedarnos con nuestras crisis a nivel familiar y que eso no se expanda. Pero hemos ganado.
Hacemos otra pregunta. Adelante, usted.
I have a question for Dimitri and another one. Y otra pregunta para Kennedy Bolívar. Dimitri, well, thank you very much for being here, and I hope God allows you to attain freedom for your country and all our countries. You said, I guess my question is, are you afraid that Putin, Russia, will invade more of Ukraine? And if the answer is yes, what would be the response of the West or NATO in that situation?
Well, thank you. First of all, now Ukraine is free. I mean, apart from Crimea and two local administrations that were taken by pro-Russian separatists. But, you know, yesterday it was 3, okay? So overnight, one administration was taken back in eastern Ukraine from those pro-Russian separatists, and nobody was killed. So it is still within quite low level of violence. And you know that Crimea was also taken by Russian troops without no military response from the Ukrainian army based in the Crimea. So now it's kind of strategic but and military but non-violent resistance. And paradoxically is Ukrainian military are better non-violent fighters than my friends from the civil resistance in Ukraine. Maybe because of discipline and maybe because they got order not to shoot in Russians. Now it will be about, first of all, about Ukrainians. I mean, NATO is helping a bit. They pledged, and especially the United States pledged, basically all kinds of support, but the U.S. boots on the ground. They pledged financial support, they pledged technical support, equipment, intelligence support. So basically Ukraine can get all kinds of support now from NATO and the United States. The problem is that the Ukrainian army, as well as the rest of the country, is not reformed since the Soviet Union. And there is no capacity in Ukraine to introduce reforms and to accept most of that assistance. So again, it's not about bringing down a dictator, that's local responsibility, it's our Ukrainian responsibility, but also making sure that democracy is consolidated, that institutions are built, that country is reformed. It's also the outside world, and I mean the Western world, of course, here. It can help a lot, but it can't do it instead of us. Okay? So to win this conflict with Russia, and I mean here dictatorial Russia, of course, because there are some people who are protesting against the Russian occupation, and these people are there in Russia. And some of the protests mentioned here today, they were started by my Russian friends. And basically my surname is Russian, so my father is Russia from Odessa and my mother is Ukrainian. So sometimes I have problems explaining to my Ukrainian friends that why the hell I'm doing all that and helping them. But the fact is that lots of Russians, they understand that actually it's the way that Putin and his gang are trying to sell this neo-imperial myth to Russians. And actually it's more about myth today. And now lots of Russians support Putin, and his support increased up to 80% of Russians. But there are still 20% who are either don't want to express their attitude or are openly anti-Putin. The letter written by a friend of mine after we had some discussion online gathered 200,000 online signatures just within 1 week. And this is in a quite repressive regime, and these people are not afraid of it. Okay, they are putting their names openly, and it's online. So I think that 80% is the maximum, and over time it will be just decreasing. And it can take from several months to several years, but supporters of Putin will realize that actually Russia cannot control these territories, even though their military will be present there now.
You mean Crimea?
Yeah, of course. And yeah, thank you.
¿Tiene una pregunta para Kennedy usted?
Sí, yo entendí que el señor Bolívar dijo que los Estados Unidos es el único país que le paga en efectivo a Venezuela por el petróleo. ¿Es correcto lo que usted
Sí,
dijo?
sí, efectivamente.
En ese caso,
Es el único que cumple el contrato
es el único que cumple el contrato dentro
de
todo-
venta en cuanto al tema del petrolero.
Claro.
O sea, es el único que nos paga, porque por ejemplo nosotros le vendemos petróleo a varios países en el mundo, como ya se sabe. Por ejemplo, pero somos el único país del mundo, o es el único gobierno idiota del mundo, que cambia petróleo, por ejemplo, por línea blanca, por lavadoras, secadoras, neveras, cocina, que el caso, por ejemplo, que ha pasado con China. Es el único país del mundo que con facultades de medicina, con un avance importantísimo en la medicina, con estudiantes inclusive egresados de universidades estadounidenses, hace convenios con Cuba para llevar médicos de Cuba a Venezuela, que sabemos que también ha sido mentira. Sí se han cumplido algunos convenios, pero que efectivamente nosotros sabemos que detrás de eso está escondido parte de una agenda política, pues. Sí. Pero Estados Unidos es el único que nos paga a nosotros en dólares y es el único ingreso que tenemos realmente nosotros, el Producto Interno Bruto.
¿Tienes una pregunta?
Sí, Kenneth, en este sentido tengo dos preguntas. Una tiene que ver con este tema. ¿Cuánto de cierto hay que hay un intercambio con Estados Unidos y Venezuela? Venezuela manda el petróleo, acá se refina y vuelve a Venezuela. ¿Cómo es ese negocio?
Sí, para nadie es un secreto que Venezuela a nivel tecnológico y a nivel petrolero sobre todo, Venezuela no refina el petróleo,
Claro.
no lo refina.
No, lo refinan aquí.
Y lo refina Estados Unidos y luego regresa a Venezuela, y eso es verdad también.
O sea, que ahí no va efectivo, ahí vuelve.
No, ahí va ya un producto, sí, exactamente.
Otra pregunta. Hoy había una reunión del gobierno que aceptó un diálogo de paz o de conciliación con funcionarios de la CELAC, unos cancilleres. Se habla de la posibilidad de que se liberen presos políticos, entre ellos podría estar López. ¿Qué cambiaría si se diera esa alternativa?
Bien, es una de las condiciones que hemos exigido para un diálogo sincero. Pero nosotros, ¿por qué queremos mantener la calle y por qué estaremos en la calle? Es precisamente porque en Venezuela no hay reconocimiento primero a la oposición. Ahí está Capriles hoy por hoy sentado con el gobierno, dialogando, y su partido político, y Capriles no tiene cómo pagarle a sus empleados de la gobernación. Entonces un doble discurso, es algo amoral además, irme a sentar yo con un gobierno, siendo yo gobernador de un estado, que además que eso no es un dinero del gobierno venezolano, es un dinero del pueblo venezolano y que le corresponde a los venezolanos. Entonces me voy a sentar yo como gobernador, por ejemplo, con un gobierno que ni siquiera me reconoce algo que a nivel de constitucional está reconocido como es el situado constitucional. Entonces, ¿cómo los estudiantes y con qué cara nos vamos a sentar con un gobierno que además ha torturado? Hay procesos judiciales contra muchachos que simplemente estaban manifestando de manera pacífica en las calles. Hay torturados que hoy han sido marcados para toda su vida, con problemas psicológicos, inclusive problemas físicos. Entonces, ¿cómo se sienta uno y bajo qué condiciones con un gobierno que además es delincuencial, un gobierno delincuencial como este?
Good evening. My name is Sigurd, and I just wanted to mention that for the Russians, they don't look at the Crimea issue as annexation, but as a reunification with part of the country that was split without nobody asking anything to anybody in a bad time for the country. So if you ask any Russian about it, it will say the country finally was reunified with those people that were left in a bad time. Regarding Yanukovych, I remember in 2004, Mr. Yushchenko was shown as the great promise. This was the guy, this was the man, this was the guy that will reform the country, that will clean everything, that will push forward the reforms, everything. 5 years later, I remember the elections. He didn't get even 5% of the vote. Yanukovych won in legal elections. Now, I don't like Obama. I didn't vote for him. I'm not going to go to try to take him out. I'm going to wait for years. I'm going to wait for the next election. Even if I lose again, I will wait for the next election. So the legal procedures have to be followed in order to change the government. If every time you don't like the president, you organize a push, and you push violence, and you get your results, there will be no legal system to protect even future presidents. So, in this case, Mr. Yanukovych was legally elected, but was ousted by a group of people that didn't like him for whatever reason, maybe right or not, but he was legally elected, and he deserved his 5 years, and if you don't like him, you vote for another one. By the way, I don't see Yushchenko on all these scenes. Finally, I saw in February, I just saw it really last week, but I couldn't believe it. Victoria Nuland is the Subsecretary of State for European Matters. And she publicly stated that the United States had spent $5 billion to oust Yanukovych government. That's a huge amount of money. I mean, usually you assign for covert operation 50 million, 100 million. We're talking about $5 billion. All the hell that money was spent. I'm afraid, I mean, you can buy all the Ukrainians with that money. That's a crazy amount. And in fact, this was money to oust a government that is not even hostile to the United States. Because Yanukovych really was a man that was trying to play both sides all the time. And that's why he finally couldn't get anything. So my question is basically two. How the $5 billion was spent? Who got that money in Ukraine? And how you expect to live if every time you don't like the president, you make a push and oust him? How the next president will live?
Well, I think the question about the $5 billion, you should ask the U.S. government. But the second question about Ukraine.
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I want to know basically not about the sum, but why, despite of the fact that some technical assistance money were spent in Ukraine now, why this money did not prevent violence and more than 100 people were killed. I mean, I was not in charge of international technical democracy assistance now in Ukraine. I can assure you that in 2004, when I was managing about $1 million, there were no victims, and Ukrainians managed to do that and to oust attempts of Yanukovych to usurp power in 2004 efficiently and non-violently. Okay. As far as the first question is concerned, the fact is that in 2010, because of disillusionment with the Orange team, Yanukovych won elections. That's true. And I checked that in a number of ways. There are some techniques to check statistically on elections. So he really won elections. But the fact is that, first of all, despite of the comment from my colleague that Orange Revolution failed, that's not true. The Orange Revolution was about an attempt of Yanukovych to usurp power in 2004 through falsified elections. And my project was in charge of two things: documenting these falsifications and making sure that people then go out on the streets and efficiently protest against that falsifications. Then the guys who got elected as a result of fair elections and as a result of success of my projects and some other projects and millions of Ukrainians who went out on the streets, they just failed that opportunity to consolidate democracy. So maybe this is one of the lessons other countries and other movements can learn, that you can get prepared for an opportunity in advance, and you must get prepared in advance, even when it is still not realistic to say that, okay, soon the dictator will be ousted. Because once you get opportunity to reform country, then it's about, welcoming heroes, but heroes are not necessarily good reformers. It's not a fact. So now it's very important, I guess, for Venezuela and for Cuba, and I assure you, it's not too early to start discussion on how to make sure that then that opportunity is not lost. Okay? Moreover, once that discussion is started now, it can send a strong signal to even those people who prefer to think in terms of, conspiracy theories, but to send them a signal, okay, well, those clever guys in the States, they are building something and they are already now discussing what will be next. Okay? And the last thing, in 2010, after Yanukovych was fairly elected, because of disappointment with the administration of my friends who got to power as a result of efficiency of my work in 2004, they just lost the chance. So there was a disillusionment, but the Orange Revolution, it was efficient. It stopped usurpation. So in 2010, when he got to power and he became the president, he usurped the power through change of constitution. And it's not just my opinion as a biased person, an activist and expert, but also there is opinion from the Venice Commission. And you know that Venice Commission is the most influential constitutional law body of the Council of Europe. And this decision reads, it's not decision, it's opinion. It reads that constitutions cannot be set by constitutional courts. These bodies, they developed to judge on whether some decisions correspond to constitutions, but not to set constitutional orders. Most constitutions in the world, they stipulate that only people and their representatives can define constitutional order. But this decision by the Constitutional Court controlled by Yanukovych in 2010 was to change the constitution and drastically increase powers of the president. And what happened next? Instead of the parliament voting on that decision, or instead of asking the people directly, just the Ministry of Justice replaced the text of the constitution of the website of the ministry with another constitution providing Yanukovych with uncontrolled power. He controlled all the internal forces, all the police, security forces. He got the right to appoint these people, although he was elected with completely different constitution, okay? So, and nobody, by the way, in the world, and even lots of Ukrainian activists and observers and journalists, they kept providing Yanukovych with legitimacy. So my key question to the American government is not that they are misusing millions or even billions of dollars. I mean, it's always like that, unfortunately. I mean, if you look at the techniques to estimate efficiency of democracy support, there is still no method to define whether those money were spent efficiently or not. As a rule, it's okay. Yeah, if a dictator is ousted, then efficiently. If not, then not. But there are also a lot of other problems with that thing. But the key problem with the attitude of the United States and the West is that they kept legitimizing Yanukovych, although he became a usurper after the change of the constitution. And of course, it's not the. Yeah, I will.
I have other questions.
Yeah, let me finish.
I have 2 other questions after yours.
Yeah, the key responsibility this problem was our local Ukrainian, because even the opposition, it kept recognizing Yanukovych as the president, and they addressed him as somebody who has the right to rule. Okay. But even independent Ukrainian observers and analysts and journalists, they kept calling him the president, okay? And now, by the way, Maduro is called president even by Human Rights Watch. I mean, they're criticizing him, okay? I mean, there are some explanations for that. I mean, I'm trying to find excuse for them that actually they have to have access to the legal system even when the power is usurped, because they have to save people, okay? So there is some explanation of that bad thing that Human Rights Watch is doing. But there are lots of other organizations, activists, journalists who are not that dependent upon the regime, okay? But still they are providing Maduro with legitimacy, although he is also a dictator and usurper. Thank you.
Una pregunta a la señora y después a la señora.
Esta pregunta es para Kennedy. En vista de significativo los ingresos que está recibiendo el gobierno de Venezuela de los Estados Unidos, ¿hay algún plan para hacer esto más el pueblo americano y el grupo conservador que está apoyando a los estudiantes venezolanos, saber que a lo mejor nosotros podemos en alguna manera influenciar a las compañías petroleras, obviamente ya quién compra de Citgo, pero influenciar a la opinión pública estadounidense de que el gobierno venezolano está recibiendo ingresos de gran significancia que está manteniendo el gobierno a flote, si es uno de los pocos que está pagando en efectivo. ¿Tienen planes de hacer esto publicarlo más?
No, la situación es bastante compleja. ¿Por qué? Porque recordemos que, bueno, la intención de Venezuela es vender y la intención de Estados Unidos evidentemente es comprar, pero aquí sí eso sí se distribuye, porque ese es el papel de una economía estable y una economía como la estadounidense. Ahora bien, el retorno o eso que percibe Venezuela como producto de la renta petrolera, producto de esta venta, eso es lo que está destinado en Venezuela, porque eso es autónomo y lo maneja el gobierno venezolano. Ahora, un plan. Nosotros tenemos un plan de gobierno y hacia allá vamos, pues. Nosotros tenemos una claridad hacia dónde debemos enfocar la lucha. Ahora, yo creo que el gobierno de Estados Unidos debe enfocarse en otras cosas, en particularidades que ya hemos denunciado. Yo presenté, por ejemplo, un documento con 163 funcionarios venezolanos con propiedades en Estados Unidos. Es lo que hablamos de la complacencia muchas veces que se permite con parte del dinero del erario público venezolano a invertir acá en Estados Unidos a agentes represores en Venezuela y que después salen huyendo y se refugian acá. Y yo creo que Estados Unidos allí es donde juega un papel determinante. Evidentemente que también en el tema de la violación de derechos humanos Estados Unidos debería pronunciarse, debería tomar cartas en el asunto. Acabo de escuchar a John Kerry decir esta misma tarde en el pronunciamiento con respecto a la situación venezolana que Estados Unidos iba a esperar para ver y que no iba a opinar en función a no dañar o maltratar lo que viene dándose en Venezuela, que es un diálogo, y en Venezuela no hay diálogo. Acabo de leer ahorita que me están comunicando a través de un mensaje de texto, 7:56 de la noche, hace escasos 15 minutos, una represión en Chacao nuevamente contra unas señoras que salieron a protestar. Estamos hablando no de jóvenes, de unas señoras que salieron con unas ollas a protestar en contra del tema de la situación en Venezuela. Me está diciendo ahorita, por ejemplo, Nixon Moreno, un exiliado, que sabemos que fue un líder estudiantil de la Universidad de los Andes, que está exiliado en Panamá. Por ejemplo, el diálogo en Táchira, reprimiendo de nuevo a la población que se encuentra en Táriba. Entonces, es decir, ese es el diálogo. Y nosotros no vamos a avalar eso, pero además de eso, yo creo que eso es lo que debe tomar como parte de este asunto el gobierno de los Estados Unidos. La denuncia contra esas violaciones de derechos humanos, la denuncia contra esta situación que Venezuela, que no afecta solamente a los venezolanos, y es lo que no ha entendido el gobierno, creo yo, de acá. Yo creo que cuando hablamos de América Latina, eso es algo que para Estados Unidos es muy complejo, porque estamos hablando de gente que nos cree enemigos de esos gobiernos y nos cree enemigos de esos pueblos. Y no es así. O sea, nosotros no somos enemigos, no yo como estadounidense, porque yo soy venezolano, pero los que vivimos en Estados Unidos y la mayoría de los estadounidenses no son enemigos del pueblo de Latinoamérica. Entonces nosotros, esa es la denuncia que yo creo que deberíamos enfocarnos nosotros.
Last week, the biggest Ukrainian oligarch who was behind the Yanukovych regime was arrested in Austria. Okay, and he got problems even when Yanukovych still was in power. How it was done? In the law of European Union, as well as in the legal system of the United States, there is provision asking all banks to check whether money on the accounts in these banks are not from corrupt activities of so-called politically exposed persons. So those guys who are making money on corruption in Venezuela and probably in Cuba, and bringing this money here, you can buying huge mansions here. They can be controlled by local laws, and it's about having campaigns here. Okay, and no additional law is needed for that, but just making the banks following the U.S. laws. Thank you.
Tengo que llevarlo yo dos a una entrevista de televisión, así que les pido una pregunta más y vamos a ver ya que terminamos.
Lo voy a aclarar.
No tengo tiempo, por favor.
I just want to correct what he said about it's just $1 billion that it's given, and I got an email last week explaining everything. It says right here that Ukrainian buys almost all its energy, natural gas from Russia. Revenues from natural gas sales are a primary source of income from Russia. And then Putin has raised because of the disagreement, has raised the price of natural gas it sells to Ukraine. Ukraine is almost broke and can't afford the increase in natural gas prices. It would be forced into bankruptcy. So Obama just announced the United States is giving Ukraine $1 billion to assist in paying for the higher prices of natural gas it buys from Russia. So the United States is actually giving Russia the $1 billion. It's just passing through Ukraine. And remember
I would just
what
add.
happened before the election when he says after, oh yes, I'll have more flexibility after I am reelected. I got that a week ago, it explains.
Emilio wants to make some closing remarks and then
Yeah,
we'll leave it
yeah,
to you.
very short. Actually, just imagine the situation. The U.S. taxpayers now will be giving money to this administration, which will use this money to give back debts to Russia, which is waging war against Ukraine. So this is a paradox, and the last fact is that this energy debt is mainly debt of Ukrainian industrial producers. Ukraine has enough its own oil, gas of its production for the population of Ukraine. So again, it's about reforms. It's about just taking this gas out of the land and making sure that Ukraine as a population is not dependent upon Russia, and leave Ukrainian oligarchs with Russia and settling all the debt issues just themselves directly with Russia. And frankly, I don't understand why US taxpayers have to pay for Ukrainian oligarchs who are indebted actually to Russia in the situation when Russia is waging war against Ukraine. Not against Ukrainian oligarchs, but against Ukrainian people. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Le agradezco a los panelistas su participación.